The millionaire froze, his heart clenching at the scene unfolding before him. The girl, Isabelle, clutching her two younger siblings, huddled beneath an old oak tree, surrounded by scattered, muddy clothes and stained baby bottles. Their aunt, Brenda Collins, reeking of cheap liquor, guzzled from a bottle, unleashing a stream of cruel insults and completely ignoring the three trembling children who begged for mercy. That moment forced him to intervene, unveiling a terrifying truth hidden behind the closed gates of that once grand house. Before we dive into the journey, please leave a comment about this story and rate it from 1 to 10. Are you okay? If there's anything you'd like to share, I'm always here to listen. I hope you find a moment of reflection as you follow this healing tale of courage and justice. The road leading to St. Jude's Children's Home was narrow and winding, lined on both sides by ancient stoic oaks. The early Atlanta autumn brought a sharp touch of chill. Dry, yellow leaves rustled in the breeze, creating a familiar, haunting whisper. Richard Sterling sat in his luxury sedan, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his gaze fixed straight ahead. 25 years had passed since he last crossed those black iron gates. Yet, the memory of that day remained painfully vivid. What city are you watching this video from and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. Richard Sterling, now 40 years old, was a media industry mogul, CEO of a major corporation, and a familiar face on the covers of countless business magazines. He was known as a sharp, powerful businessman, but at this moment, all those layers seemed to dissolve. Standing before the familiar gates, he was once again the abandoned orphan boy who had dreamed of a family, a dream that had never materialized. The car stopped, its engine humming softly. Richard shut it off and sat motionless for a long time. He peered past the rusted, stained fence. The children's home looked almost the same, only more worn and decrepit. The somber sky hung heavy, a thick gray tone making the scene even more oppressive. He took a deep breath, opened the car door, and slowly entered the courtyard. Walking the familiar path, the smell of dampness and rotting wood mingled with the autumn wind, transported him back. Every brick beneath his feet carried the weight of a memory. The days he was punished facing the wall, the cold meals and the nights spent sitting with his knees hugged to his chest, gazing out the window, silently wishing someone would come to take him home. The director's office was at the end of the hall. The heavy wooden door still bore the nameplate, Mr. Thomas Campos, Director. Richard pushed it slightly, and the door opened with a groan. Inside, Mr. Campos, now over 70, sat behind the same old chipped wooden desk. The old man's back was hunched, his hair entirely white, and he wore spectacles perched on his nose. However, his eyes, though dimmed by age, still held the sharpness that once commanded the children's obedience. "Excuse me, sir." The old man's voice was slow, his gaze cautious. Richard paused. A sad smile touched his face. "My name is Richard Sterling, the boy who used to sit in the corner of the yard, quiet and stubborn. You probably don't recall." Mr. Campos blinked, then suddenly burst into a shaky laugh. "My goodness, Richie, the boy I once worried no one would adopt. It's been so long. I thought you'd never return." Richard approached the desk and bowed slightly in greeting. They both sat, and the long silence was broken only by the squeaky rotation of the ceiling fan. After a while, Mr. Campos asked softly, "How is life treating you now?" Richard was silent for a few seconds, then replied, "I have a career, I have a home, but I still feel something is missing. Perhaps a part of my heart is still here." Mr. Campos nodded, his gaze lost in the distance. "I'm happy for you. Not everyone is strong enough to make it this far." They talked a bit more about the home, about the kids who had grown up there, until Richard suddenly lowered his voice, his eyes filled with anticipation. "Mr. Campos, is Anthony Bravo still alive? I promised myself I would come back one day to thank him." Mr. Campos's face froze. He took off his glasses and placed them on the desk, his expression heavy with regret. After a long silence, he sighed and spoke each word slowly. "Richard Anthony passed away. A boating accident off the coast of Florida 6 months ago. His wife didn't survive either. They left behind 3 young children." Richard was stunned. The air around him seemed to solidify. He clenched his hand so tightly his knuckles cracked. His voice trembled. "No, it can't be. He was the reason I didn't give up. Without Anthony, The Richard Sterling of today wouldn't exist. The memories flooded back. He distinctly recalled that stifling afternoon when he was 14. Anthony, barely in his 20s then, showed up in a clean white shirt and a wide smile. He brought pastries, a notebook, and more than anything, the words that were etched into Richard's mind. "You're not a bad kid. You just need a shot to prove it. Don't let anyone steal your future." Those very words had rescued a rebellious teenager from the brink. Richard quickly wiped the corner of his eyes. Mr. Campos handed him a slip of paper, his voice pained. After their death, all of Anthony and his wife's assets were transferred to a trust for the children's upkeep, but the 3 little ones are now living with their aunt. "I hear she's strict and drinks often. I worry about them," Richard swallowed, then spoke through clenched teeth. "Can you give me the address? I need to go there to fulfill my promise for him, and to meet those kids." Mr. Campos nodded slowly, pulled an old sheet of paper from the drawer, quickly scribbled the address, and handed it to Richard. The old man's hand trembled, but his eyes were resolute. "Go, Richard. Perhaps they need you, just as you once needed Anthony." Richard clenched his fist, setting his lips. A wave of hot blood rushed through him, mixed with pain and determination. He turned without another word and walked slowly down the hall. He headed quickly to his car, clutching the paper with the address. The engine roared, blending with the sound of the wind. His eyes burned with a fire that had never extinguished. The fire of memory, of gratitude, and of a promise. The car drove forward, leaving a path covered with fallen leaves, heading toward the Brown mansion, Anthony's former home. Richard's gaze burned like molten steel, and in his heart, a fire of worry ignited. Following Mr. Campos's news, the black sedan glided through the gray twilight. The wind buffeted the windows, bringing the cold of a late autumn evening. Richard gripped the steering wheel tightly, his eyes tense, his mind still echoing with the oath he had taken at the old home's gates. He gently pressed the accelerator. The straight suburban road led him toward the Brown estate, the home that once belonged to the man who had changed his life. Richard imagined 3 children raised with love. Perhaps they were playing in the large garden. Perhaps they were being looked after by their family with hot food, clean clothes, and a peaceful sleep. The idea eased his heart for a moment, but just as he turned onto the estate's driveway, a sound tore through the air, snapping him back to reality. A cry, not the whining of a child throwing a tantrum. It was a choked, hoarse, desperate sob, a sound that made Richard wince, his heart sinking. He immediately stopped the car, rolled down the window, and strained to hear. The sound was coming from right beside the main gate. Richard opened the car door and quickly moved forward, and then he saw it. A woman was staggering next to the iron fence, clutching a half-empty liquor bottle. Her hair was a tangled mess. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her skin bore the marks of alcohol-soaked nights. It was Brenda Collins, Anthony's sister-in-law, the woman the court had named temporary guardian of the 3 children after their parents' deaths. She was supposed to be their protector. However, what Richard witnessed was the complete opposite. Next to Brenda lay a small suitcase and a bag of children's clothes tossed carelessly on the ground. The clothes were scattered, stained with mud. At the foot of the large tree by the gate, a girl about 8 years old was sitting on the ground. It was Isabelle Bravo, Anthony's eldest daughter. Her face was pale from the cold, her eyes swollen with tears, and her small arms tightly encircled her 9-month-old twin siblings, Ethan and Amelia Bravo. The babies were wrapped in a thin, damp blanket, their small bodies trembling, their cheeks red from the freezing wind. Isabelle lifted her tear-streaked face toward Brenda, her voice pleading between sobs. "Please, Aunt Brenda, at least let us inside. Ethan is freezing. He's shaking all over. I beg you!" Brenda let out a sharp, mocking laugh, leaning against the iron fence, waving the bottle in the air as if taunting them. "You think I'm your nanny? I don't have to carry these useless brats for the rest of my life. I have enough problems of my own to deal with. All you do is drain me." Isabelle choked back her sobs, hugging her siblings even tighter, her broken voice trembling. "Auntie, please don't kick us out. I'll do the chores. I'll clean, I'll wash the clothes. I won't bother you ever again. I just ask one thing. Please, don't leave the babies outside. I beg you." Isabelle's small shoulders shook, her red-rimmed eyes fixed on Brenda's alcohol-stained face. Ethan let out choked sobs while Amelia whimpered weakly in her sister's arms. Her breathing was so faint that she seemed about to fade away. Brenda waved her hand dismissively, her voice dripping with contempt like a final verdict. "Shut up, I'm not your mother. I've suffered enough raising you for months. And what do I get in return? Nothing but burdens. One cries all day, the other two cling like leeches. And you, Isabelle, I'm sick of that pitiful beggar face of yours. Always whispering, auntie, auntie, it's exhausting. Your parents are dead and they left me with 3 useless debts. I have no obligation to sacrifice my life for any of you." She finished speaking, stooped down, and deliberately spat near Isabelle's feet, her words cutting like knives. "Listen to me, you wretched girl. If you're cold, that's your problem. I'd rather raise a dog than waste space in this house with useless brats like you." Richard stood motionless. The sight of Isabelle sitting on the ground hugging her siblings painfully overlapped with his own memories. His mother, broken and hopeless, once sat huddled in a corner of their house, silently weeping while her drunk husband yelled at her. His chest tightened as if an invisible hand was crushing his heart. He couldn't stand by for another second. His voice rang out firm and authoritative. "Enough!" Brenda startled and turned around. Seeing Richard in his tailored suit, his face cold as ice, she squinted. "And who are you?" Richard walked directly toward the tree where the children were huddled. He gently placed his hand on Isabelle's thin, trembling shoulder. Leaning down, he met Brenda's eyes. His voice was low but unwavering. "These are Anthony's children. And what exactly are you doing to them?" Brenda burst into a mocking, slurred laugh. "And who are you to butt in? This is my family business, not yours. I'm their legal guardian. I have every right to decide. Don't think just because you wear an expensive suit you can lecture me. Get out!" Brenda Collins, emboldened by the cheap liquor she'd been steadily consuming since her legal setback, swayed dangerously toward Richard, lifting the half-empty bottle of what looked like bottom-shelf whiskey towards him. Her words were slurred, yet edged with pure venomous spite. "You think you can just swoop in, wearing your $5,000 suit, and take on the burden of 3 brats? You, a lonely man who hasn't raised a dog, let alone children. You'll see. They'll drag you into the mud faster than you can imagine. They are worthless baggage." Suddenly, Brenda swung her arm fiercely, the cheap bottle making a terrible whistling sound before it connected with Richard's chest. A sharp, sickening crash echoed as the glass shattered on the imported marble tile. Thick, dark red wine, mixed now with the whiskey, spread across his bespoke charcoal gray suit jacket, running down his sleeve and dripping heavily onto the pavement. The acrid, sickening smell of spilled alcohol and failure rose from the soaked fabric, clinging to the cold autumn air. Brenda hissed, her voice sharp and poisonous, her face a mask of ruined fury. "Mind your own business, you old fool. This is the price you pay for sticking your nose into other people's families and affairs." Richard stood utterly motionless. He didn't flinch, didn't roar back with the violence she clearly expected. He simply took a long, steady breath, the icy dampness of the wine seeping through the fine Italian wool to his skin. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered his head, removed the heavy, ruined jacket, folded it with surgical precision despite the wine stains, and placed it neatly on the grass beside him. His movements were calculated, an unnerving display of control, but his eyes, fixed on Brenda, burned with fierce resolve. His voice, when it finally came, was low, a rumble of controlled thunder, every word cutting and clear. "You can humiliate me, ruin a custom-made suit, but you have no right, absolutely no right, to humiliate and abuse these children. They are innocent." Isabelle held her breath, her tiny frame rigid. Her thin arm remained wrapped tightly around Ethan and Amelia, trying desperately to shield the little ones from the terrifying confrontation. Yet, in her trembling, tear-filled eyes, a fragile spark of hope flickered, a tiny candle in the storm. Richard knelt slowly, his knees hitting the cold stone, and gently lifted Ethan into his arms. The boy was shaking violently, his skin pale, his lips a faint blue from the exposure. Richard pressed him tightly against the warmth of his chest, his heart aching with profound sorrow. Then he turned and gathered Amelia in his other arm. The little girl was still sucking her thumb, her eyelids drooping with utter exhaustion, her tiny body slowly warming against the unexpected haven of his expensive shirt. Isabelle looked up, her red-rimmed eyes fixed on Richard, her new savior. Her voice was a broken whisper, choked with fear. "Sir, are you really going to take us?" Richard met her eyes, his seasoned gaze, the gaze of a man who commanded boardrooms, now brimming with a sudden, fierce certainty. He nodded gently and spoke slowly, deliberately, each word an unbreakable promise. "From now on, no one will ever abandon you again. You are safe." Brenda, completely unhinged, erupted in harsh, broken laughter that scraped like metal on glass. She waved the jagged neck of the broken bottle, its sharp edge gleaming under the porch light. "And who do you think you are, Santa Claus? Wait till the cops drag you away for kidnapping." Richard lifted his head, his voice heavy as forged iron, silencing her with its authority. "You can call the police. You can drag me into any court in this state. But this is where I draw the line. These 3 children will not spend another minute exposed outside tonight. They are coming with me." Isabelle's small, trembling hand instinctively grabbed the sleeve of Richard's crisp white shirt. Mud clung to her fingers, but he didn't pull away. He walked toward the car, holding the twins tight against his chest, and with his free hand, he gently helped Isabelle to her feet, guiding her away from the wreckage. From behind, Brenda's hysterical screams and curses continued, but Richard didn't turn back. The car stopped slowly in front of his own magnificent, Georgian-style estate in the exclusive suburbs of Roswell, GA. Richard turned off the engine, his hands still clutching the steering wheel, preparing for the daunting task ahead. He opened the back door. "We're here. This is your Uncle Richard's house, your new home." Isabelle lifted her head, her swollen eyes taking in the towering, silent structure. The mansion looked grand, with all the porch lights on, yet so utterly silent it seemed frozen in time. The girl swallowed hard and whispered, a raw truth cutting through the silence. "A house with no sound." Richard's expression softened. He knew that silence well. He replied slowly, his voice laced with an unexpected sadness. "Because I live alone, Isabelle." "No more. Please make yourselves at home." Inside the cavernous, immaculate foyer, Isabelle immediately slumped onto the large leather sofa, still hugging her siblings, refusing to relinquish her post as their protector. Richard felt the crushing coldness of his house acutely, a coldness that money could never fix. He hurried to the custom-designed kitchen, his movements clumsy. He found the store-bought baby formula he'd hastily purchased, fumbling with the instructions. "I've never done this before, but kids, trust your Uncle Richard," Isabelle whispered from the living room. "My mom also said that she would be fine, and then she was gone forever." Richard froze. The words, a direct echo of his own childhood trauma, stabbing the wound inside him that had never truly healed. The doorbell saved him. It was Linda Vargas, his longtime unflappable executive assistant. Linda saw the mud, the scattered children, and the sheer disbelief on Richard's face. "Sir, what on earth is going on here?" Richard confessed the whole ugly story. Linda, ever the professional, gently approached Isabelle, offering a warm, steady presence. "Hello, sweetheart. I'm Linda. I'm here to help. Nobody is going to take your siblings away." Richard placed the bottle in front of Isabelle. "Isabelle, your little brother is crying. Try to give it to him." Isabelle slowly reached out and took the bottle. In that exchange, an unspoken bond of trust was formed. Linda later warned Richard, "Sir, this is a beautiful thing you've done, but this isn't temporary. This is for life." Richard looked at the children, his voice firm with renewed conviction. "I know, Linda, and I've made my decision." That night, the house for the first time held the sounds of life. Richard lay on the sofa, listening to the soft cooing and the small protective coughs of Isabelle. Despite the newness, worry still weighted his heart. In the deep silence, Isabelle's small voice rose, clear and heartbreaking. "You're going to abandon us too, aren't you? Like everyone else." Richard sat up, knowing that this question was the core of their fragile bond. The next morning, Richard noticed Isabelle's threadbare socks. He found a brand new pair of ash-gray wool socks, a rare, unused gift, and gently placed them on the table. "Try these on," Isabelle asked, her voice wavering. "Do I have to give them back?" Richard knelt, meeting her eyes. "They're yours, Isabelle. When a father gives a gift to his child, he never asks for it back. They are yours forever." Isabelle didn't move, but a deep, fundamental shift occurred within her, and the invisible door of trust quietly opened. Meanwhile, back in her ruined life, Brenda Collins met with Michael Herrero, a fast-talking, morally ambiguous Atlanta lawyer known for sharp, aggressive courtroom tactics. Brenda slammed her fist on the table. "I will not lose that money. Those children are my inheritance. If that Richard dares to take them, I'll be ruined." Michael smirked, his eyes gleaming with professional malice. "The law can be bent, Ms. Collins. We will file a powerful petition to dispute custody. We will paint Mr. Sterling as an overly aggressive single man trying to exploit an estate. The assets will revert to you." Richard received the chilling notification that afternoon. Custody dispute. Collins versus Sterling. He knew this was no longer a simple rescue. It was a full-blown legal war. The next morning, Richard, Isabelle, and his powerful, highly respected attorney, David Torres, walked into the packed Fulton County courthouse. Judge Soto, a man known for his deep moral convictions, opened the hearing. Michael Herrero launched a venomous attack. "My client, the biological aunt, has been maliciously displaced. Mr. Sterling, a stranger, is kidnapping these children and exploiting their vulnerability." Richard sprang to his feet, his voice booming with fury. "Kidnapping? I saw her leave them shivering under a tree. She called them a burden and treated them like garbage." Brenda screamed back. "I'm their blood. Who has more right?" David Torres then called their surprise witness, Sandra Lopez, the brave former neighbor. Sandra, visibly terrified but resolute, testified. "I saw Ms. Collins throwing the children's cherished belongings into the yard. They sat by the gate for hours. I should have called the police then, but I swear before this court that what I'm telling you is the truth." The courtroom erupted. Isabelle, overwhelmed, leaped from her seat and ran to Richard, burying her face in his suit jacket. "I want to stay with you. You didn't leave us in the rain." Richard held her tightly. "I promise I will never abandon you." Judge Soto, visibly moved, struck his gavel. "Pending further investigation into Ms. Collins's actions, temporary custody is granted to Mr. Richard Sterling." Brenda stood up, her face a mask of primal rage. "You will regret this. I won't let this go." The financial battle was just beginning. Later, Brenda met with the slick con artists Victor Rivers and Kara Ortega in a dimly lit bar, eager for any path to money and revenge. Victor showed her a stack of papers detailing a bogus investment opportunity. "Sign this, and the children's inheritance becomes investment capital. We guarantee you'll double it in a few months, and you'll be able to crush Sterling in court." Blinded by greed, Brenda immediately signed, foolishly believing this was her chance. However, weeks later, the investment account was empty. Victor and Kara were untraceable. Brenda shrieked in her hotel room, realizing she had been completely fleeced. "I'll drag those kids back! I swear I won't let this go." Richard, meanwhile, experienced the true joy of fatherhood. He took the children to the pediatrician, helped them explore the park, and read to them every night. One night, Isabelle whispered, "If you really want me to, I could call you Dad." Richard's voice broke. "You don't have to rush, Isabelle, but I will never abandon you." The final legal blow came from Detective Mark Wilson, who delivered irrefutable forensic evidence to Richard. Ms. Collins withdrew funds without authorization, and Michael Herrero forged Anthony Bravo's signature to facilitate the theft. At the supplemental hearing, Sandra Lopez returned with the plastic box containing the children's ruined clothes and toys. Judge Soto, grim-faced, confronted Michael Herrero with the forgery evidence. Michael stammered, his career crashing around him. Brenda screamed at her lawyer. "You promised me I'd win!" Judge Soto's voice thundered. "The court orders the freeze of all Ms. Brenda Collins's assets." Counsel Michael Herrero is suspended from the practice of law. Richard had won the legal battle, but as he looked at Brenda, a broken, defeated woman, he felt only sorrow, not triumph. That rainy night, Brenda, completely ruined, stumbled back to Richard's mansion, collapsing onto the cold porch. "Richard, I was wrong. Please, just let me see the children." Richard stood tall in the doorway, the rain soaking his clothes. "You had your chance, Brenda. You chose greed and hate, but I will not let you drown," he called Linda. "Linda, find her a temporary place to stay and get her a simple, honest job, a chance to rebuild her life." Richard turned to Isabelle, who was watching. "Uncle, why did you help her after everything she did?" Richard crouched. There are people who need a hand, even when they no longer deserve it. That is how we stop the cycle of pain. Months later, the final custody ruling arrived. Permanent custody of Isabelle, Ethan, and Amelia Bravo is granted to Mr. Richard Sterling. Richard hugged his new family, tears of pure joy streaming down his face. From now on, we are a family. In the subsequent celebration, Ethan and Amelia shouted, "Daddy! Daddy!" Richard's voice broke. "Daddy is here and Daddy will always be here," Isabelle whispered. "I'm not afraid of being abandoned anymore, Daddy." That night, Richard gifted Isabelle his old worn baseball glove, a cherished item from his own lonely childhood. "Your father, Anthony, gave me this, Isabelle," he said. "Don't let anyone steal your future. Now it's yours." Isabelle held the glove close, the leather soft against her cheek. "Daddy, I'll keep it, I promise." Richard knew his path was clear. "Anthony, you gave me this family. I will protect them with my life." Richard stood in the sunlight the next morning, watching his children play. He had found healing and purpose. He had won, but he knew the final battle was yet to come. Outside his window, a black car remained parked. Victor Rivers and his associate had not left Atlanta. They were waiting for their moment, but Richard Sterling was ready. He was no longer just a mogul. He was a father. This incredible story of a man who found redemption and family against all odds has reached its end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Insight Narratives to follow more stories of courage and justice. Share your thoughts below.